Today is Tuesday, August 7th, 2018. This is Stephen Fagin, the curator at the 6th Floor Museum at Dealey Plaza, and we are starting day 2 of our oral history with Howard Willens. Mr. Willens, we're back, and we're picking up with entry 18, which is dated Friday, March 27th, 1964. Why don't you introduce this entry to us?
It reports on a meeting that I participated in with representatives from the CIA. The colleague who was with me on this occasion was Sam Stern. I had identified Sam earlier in our discussion as one of the 3 people that I personally knew and recommended to be solicited to serve on the staff of the commission. Sam was a very mature young lawyer who oozed self-confidence and was especially good in mediating disputes and in achieving the goals of his clients. He was involved in this meeting because Sam's assignment was presidential protection, which included in part exploration of the intelligence capabilities of the CIA, the FBI, and the Secret Service in order to see what those agencies knew about Oswald in advance and how they communicated to each other. So Sam was, on this occasion, going to examine the records at the CIA and see what was in their folders with respect to contacts with Oswald. And it turned out, actually, in later years, that the records that ultimately were reviewed by Sam and aided the commission were not the entire record at the CIA. This became a matter of controversy that was explored further with the House Select Committee in the late 1970s. And in fact, even today, in a period of document release, there are concerns about documents at the CIA which have never seen the light of day. I do not know whether that's true or not, but this was a process we had at the Commission to begin to delve into the intelligence capabilities of the agencies and their practices of communicating among themselves or not doing so. So that was an important part of the meeting, but Slauson, who was working in the area, was also available, and he was discussing with Mr. Helms, who was a deputy director at the time, and CIA personnel, Mr. Whitten, about the Mexican investigation. The Oswald visit to Mexico 7 weeks before the assassination was, from the outset, one of the great mysteries of the investigation. So there was a need to explore why he went, where he went, what he did to the fullest extent possible. And although the agencies in Mexico, the FBI and the CIA, did have some information about Oswald's visit to the Soviet and Russian consulates, they really admitted they didn't have the whole story. And they suggested to David and to me that if the commission wanted to look further, it might be advantageous for them to go to Mexico themselves. And that's ultimately what we did. So that was the substance of this particular entry.
I know you cover the Mexico City trip in some detail, but it's interesting. Oswald was in Mexico from September 26th to October 3rd. It was a very short visit, and yet probably more so than any other activity in the last year or two of his life, it has achieved the most scrutiny by the research community over these years. And yet the Warren Commission back in 1964 really did look into this very deeply. I was reading in your book, and I want to turn to page 111, because there's a quote which I think is indicative of the level of detail in which the investigators studied this trip, and it's talking about what Coleman and Slauson wanted to achieve in their investigation of Mexico. It says they wanted, 1, further information regarding the activities of the American Embassy in Mexico City after the assassination, 2, information regarding investigative work of the Mexican authorities regarding Oswald, 3, permission from Mexican authorities to use their investigative materials in our final report, 4, additional investigative activity by Mexican authorities, 5, further investigative activities by American government agencies abroad, and 6, 6 meetings in Mexico City to discuss the matter with Mexican authorities and U.S. investigative agencies. That is quite a laundry list as a wish list of what they want the investigation to cover. So clearly this was something you were taking very seriously.
Yes, and Bill Coleman and David Slauson were a very good team. Bill Coleman was handicapped in some respect because of private firm commitments, so he usually allotted Friday of every week to spend full time. But he was eager to participate in the visit to Mexico City, as was David.
One last question about the CIA. We hear so much today about information withheld from the commission, and yet Alan Dulles, of course, sat on the Warren Commission. In retrospect, looking at this through the benefit of 50 plus years of hindsight, do you feel like there was a conflict of interest with Dulles being on the commission?
Well, I wouldn't call it a conflict of interest particularly. He did bring to the commission expertise in the intelligence field, and as such was an articulate member of the commission on any issues that touched on intelligence requirements or opportunities for the commission to develop facts that were useful. What he did not do was, of course, share with the fellow members of the commission, at least on the record, what he knew about the CIA planning for assassination of Castro. And I feel in retrospect that he made a hard decision. I can't say it was wrong. It was more protective of the CIA than it was solicitous of the obligations of the commission. To that extent, I think he let his colleagues of the commission proceed without information that they might have well considered critical to their completion of the task. On the other hand, he was, very, very gracious, very thoughtful, very helpful in many respects. So my thoughts on this subject have mellowed over the years, and we have to live with what he did and did not do.